"I can assure you," Elijah replied, his voice now taking on a cooler tone. "This appointment was confirmed directly by Dr. Jackson's office yesterday afternoon. There is no security flag." "That's what the flag is for, sir," Monica replied with growing confidence. "These verification protocols are designed to look exactly like normal confirmations. It's an additional security layer for our proprietary research discussions." She was now suggesting he had been fooled, further diminishing his intelligence and competence. The line of legitimate visitors continued to move past him. He had been effectively sidelined, his status as an invited medical researcher revoked by arbitrary decree. "I would like to speak to Dr. Jackson directly," Elijah stated. It wasn't a request or a threat, it was a simple declaration of intent. "Be my guest," Monica replied with artificial sweetness, pressing a button on her console. "I've notified his office of the situation." A middle-aged man in a wrinkled lab coat arrived a few minutes later. Dr. Matthew Collins, Associate Director of Research Operations, looked between Monica and Elijah with the practiced neutrality of someone who had mediated thousands of such conflicts. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, his voice carrying the weariness of a man who viewed such interruptions as annoying distractions from real work. "This visitor has a code 47 security flag on his appointment with Dr. Jackson," Monica explained before Elijah could speak. "He's insisting on proceeding without proper verification." Dr. Collins didn't ask for Elijah's side of the story. He didn't question the existence of a code 47. He saw a simple equation. On one side was his employee, a known quantity. On the other was an unknown visitor who was causing a delay. The path of least resistance was clear. He consulted his tablet with an air of great seriousness, scrolling through screens of information. "Sir," he began, addressing Elijah with the patronizing tone of a bureaucrat explaining an unchangeable rule. "I see the issue here. Monica is correct. Your appointment has been flagged by our security protocol. I'm sure it's just a formality, but our procedures are clear. Any flagged appointment must be revalidated through the proper channels." He had taken Monica's fabrication and enhanced it, wrapping it in a thicker, more intimidating layer of bureaucratic nonsense. He was building a wall of procedure, brick by imaginary brick, to keep Elijah out. "That will cause me to miss my meeting with Dr. Jackson," Elijah stated simply. "I've flown across the country specifically for this discussion about my research on synthetic antibodies targeting drug-resistant infections." Dr. Collins offered a synthetic, uncaring smile. "Sir, I understand. Everyone who comes here has important research. Our protocols exist for a reason." Those words, "everyone who comes here has important research," were the point of no return. It was a statement of such profound, dismissive arrogance that it transformed the situation. For Dr. Elijah Washington, this was no longer a frustrating administrative inconvenience. It had become a perfect, crystal-clear case study in the catastrophic failure of MedCore's corporate culture. He looked at Dr. Collins and Monica, one with his practiced indifference, the other with her thinly veiled contempt, and saw in them the living embodiment of everything wrong with the healthcare industry. This was a culture that had replaced scientific curiosity with bureaucratic gatekeeping, innovation with procedure, and respect with rigid hierarchy enforcement. Elijah's research had already identified these as theoretical barriers to medical advancement. Now he had undeniable first-hand proof. "Let me understand this clearly," Elijah said, his voice calm but carrying a new weight. "You're refusing to honor a valid appointment based on a code that doesn't exist in any published MedCore policy." Dr. Collins shifted uncomfortably, sensing a level of articulate precision he hadn't expected from someone in a university sweatshirt. "Sir, I don't make the policies, I just enforce them. The system has flagged your appointment and we can't override that at reception." "Which system?" Elijah pressed. "Which specific security protocol? Is it the Hamilton system or the Mercer protocol? Because MedCore uses both, and neither has a code 47. Dr. Collins blinked rapidly, caught in a lie he couldn't defend. "Sir, I'm not at liberty to discuss our security protocols. We can't hold up Dr. Jackson's schedule for one problematic appointment." "I'm sorry, but you'll need to reschedule," Monica interjected, trying to regain control of the narrative. "I can help you with that process if you'd like." Quote, They had successfully used the company's own rulebook, albeit a fictionalized version of it, to enforce their prejudice. They had won, or so they thought. They turned their attention back to the reception desk, ready to continue with the regular appointments, leaving Elijah standing alone, effectively barred from his meeting. "Excuse me," I couldn't help overhearing. The voice came from a woman who had been working intently on her tablet in the waiting area. Dr. Sarah Gonzalez, 38, was a senior medical correspondent for the New England Journal of Medicine. She had been preparing notes for the MedCore Healthcare Innovation Conference, the same event that had brought many visitors to the building today. As she approached, memories flashed through her mind of being the only Latina in research symposiums, of being mistaken for support staff at medical conferences, of having her questions ignored while identical ones from male colleagues were answered. She recognized the particular tone Monica had used with Elijah. She'd heard it directed at herself too many times. "My name is Dr. Sarah Gonzalez from the New England Journal of Medicine." She approached the desk with professional confidence. "And I'm almost certain that the gentleman you're refusing to accommodate is Dr. Elijah Washington from Johns Hopkins, whose synthetic antibody research was just featured in our publication last month." Monica and Dr. Collins both turned to look at her, their expressions of annoyance deepening. The introduction of a journalist was an unwelcome complication. "Ma'am, as I'm sure you understand, we have a strict policy against discussing visitor identities or situations in public," Dr. Collins said, his voice a smooth, practiced deflection. "This is a private administrative matter. Please step back." Sarah held her ground. "With all due respect, it stopped being a private matter when your receptionist publicly accused him of not being qualified to meet with your research director." "I did no such thing," Monica protested, though her earlier behavior clearly suggested otherwise. "Dr. Washington is scheduled to deliver the keynote at tomorrow's Healthcare Innovation Conference," Sarah continued. "His work on multi-drug-resistant infections has been called the most significant breakthrough in antibiotics in the past decade. Denying him his meeting isn't just an administrative issue. It's potentially a significant setback for public health research. Are you aware of who he is?" Dr. Collins's face remained blank. The name Dr. Elijah Washington meant nothing to him. In his world, the only names that mattered were on his department roster and budget spreadsheets. "Ma'am, for the last time, please step away from the desk, or I will have to call security," he threatened, his patience clearly wearing thin. The threat to call security on a representative of one of medicine's most prestigious journals was a stunning act of professional malpractice. Sarah, recognizing she could push no further without being ejected herself, took a step back, her mind racing. She didn't just have a story. She had a bombshell about institutional barriers to medical innovation. "Dr. Washington," she said, turning to Elijah, "would you care to comment on how MedCore treats visiting medical researchers?" Elijah looked at her with quiet appreciation. "Not at this time, Dr. Gonzalez, but I imagine we'll have plenty to discuss tomorrow at the conference." His calm response carried a note of significance that sent a chill down Sarah's spine. She had covered enough medical industry controversies to recognize the signs of imminent action. Several other visitors had begun to notice the commotion. A young biotech executive who recognized Elijah from a recent TED Talk stepped forward. "That's Dr. Elijah Washington," he said to Dr. Collins. "His antibody research could save millions of lives. You're making a massive mistake." Dr. Collins's confidence wavered for the first time. "Sir, please return to your seat. We're handling this situation." The biotech executive shook his head in disbelief. "Your loss. When this hits the medical journals tomorrow, your reputation is going to tank." He had no idea how prophetic those words would be. A middle-aged woman in line, who had been watching the exchange with growing discomfort, finally spoke up. "I don't know who this gentleman is, but I've been coming to MedCore for years, and I've never seen anyone treated this way. It's disgraceful." Her comment triggered murmurs of agreement from other visitors. The public spectacle of discrimination was making everyone uncomfortable, not just for Elijah, but for what it revealed about a company they had respected. Elijah watched the exchange with detached interest. The associate director's casual dismissal of both a New England Journal of Medicine correspondent and a visitor who recognized him confirmed his final diagnosis. The institutional arrogance at MedCore was so profound it had rendered the company blind, deaf, and utterly incompetent. His plan to help them, To work with their research department as a friendly partner now seemed hopelessly naive. A company this sick could not be healed with gentle medicine. It required radical, invasive surgery. It required a complete withdrawal of his research from their consideration. He looked at Dr. Collins and Monica, who were now smugly directing other visitors, believing they had successfully dispatched all challengers. He did not argue further. He did not plead. He simply gave them a short, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a nod of concession. It was a nod of acknowledgement, the kind a medical researcher gives when observing the final, confirming symptom of a diagnosis. "You think badges keep people out?" he said quietly, almost to himself. "But sometimes they just reveal who should never be let in." Dr. Elijah Washington walked away from MedCore Industries' reception area with unhurried steps, his leather messenger bag slung over his shoulder. The busy lobby continued its rhythmic chaos around him. Executives rushing to meetings, researchers comparing notes, the quiet hum of innovation playing out in miniature dramas. He found a quiet corner against a window overlooking the sprawling medical research campus where MedCore's empire of healthcare innovation stretched across several modern buildings. Other visitors who had been turned away were slumped in chairs looking dejected, arguing with colleagues on their phones. Elijah did not pull out his phone. He did not try to reschedule. He simply sat down, opened his messenger bag, and removed his sleek laptop. The quiet click of the laptop opening was, for MedCore Industries, the sound of a starting gun in a race to scientific oblivion. As he waited for his secure operating system to boot, his mind flashed back to Boston, 2017. He had just completed a groundbreaking study on antibiotic resistance mechanisms and was scheduled to present at a major medical conference. When he'd arrived at the luxury hotel venue, the security guard had directed him to the service entrance. "Deliveries around back," the guard had said without looking up. "I'm a keynote speaker," Elijah had replied, presenting his credentials. The guard had looked up then, skepticism etched into every line of his face. "Yeah, and I'm Dr. Fauci." Even after showing his ID and conference badge, Elijah had been forced to call the organizer and wait in the lobby. He'd walked onto that stage 20 minutes late, facing an audience whose first impression had been colored by his tardiness. He delivered a flawless presentation anyway. 6 months later, he'd been invited to join the conference's scientific advisory board after his research gained international recognition. His first action had been to revamp their security protocols and staff training. Then came Chicago, 2019. Arriving for a meeting with potential research partners dressed in business casual attire, he'd been stopped at the building's entrance. "Deliveries go through the back," the security guard had said without looking up from his newspaper. "I'm here for the Northfield Pharmaceuticals meeting," Elijah had replied. The guard had finally looked up, skepticism written across his face. "Yeah, and I'm here to accept my Nobel Prize. Service entrance is around back." Elijah had shown his ID, his meeting invitation, had even called his contact upstairs. He'd still been forced to wait in the lobby for 20 minutes until someone came down to verify his identity. He'd walked into that meeting room 20 minutes late, facing the subtle smirks of executives who assumed his tardiness confirmed their biases. He'd secured the partnership anyway. 6 months later, he'd been appointed to their scientific advisory board. The first change he'd made was to the visitor access protocols. These memories hardened his resolve. The discrimination he'd faced today wasn't unique. It was simply the most recent manifestation of a persistent pattern. But this time, he had the means to do more than change a security staff or influence a research partnership. He had the power to transform an entire healthcare ecosystem. Elijah focused back on his laptop, now connected to the building's guest Wi-Fi through a secure VPN. He opened a series of encrypted folders, navigating to files labeled Medical Partnership Contingency Scenarios. He had prepared for this moment without knowing it would come, a standard practice in his methodical approach to research partnerships. His original plan, Project Hippocrates, had been predicated on the assumption that MedCore's problems stemmed from strategic mismanagement rather than cultural rot. He had believed the company could be saved through collaborative transformation. Now he understood that the disease went much deeper than he had realized. The arrogance, the prejudice, the institutional indifference, these weren't symptoms of mismanagement. They were the company's defining features. He opened a new file and retitled it, Project Asclepius, Strategic Redirection of Synthetic Antibody Research and Healthcare System Partnerships. The lobby noise faded away as Elijah entered a state of intense concentration. He was no longer a researcher who had been humiliated. He was a strategic force about to reshape an entire industry. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced precision, updating research parameters, revising partnership approaches, and recalculating implementation timelines. The personal sting of humiliation had been transmuted into cold, clear strategic energy. He was in his element now, the momentary indignity already receding in importance compared to the systematic response he was crafting. This was no longer about a missed meeting or a rude receptionist. This was about fundamental questions of scientific integrity and institutional culture. His transformation was complete. He was no longer a visitor. He was justice incarnate about to render verdict on an entire system. Elijah began drafting a new email, the cursor blinking in rhythm with the precision of his thoughts. The recipient list was small, but contained a terrifying amount of institutional power. The directors of the National Institutes of Health, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the World Health Organization, with carbon copies to his research team at Johns Hopkins and his intellectual property attorney. The subject line was a masterpiece of understated lethality. Notice of redirected research partnership regarding synthetic antibody patent applications, US 10763285B2 and PCT US 2023-015789. To the average person, this was meaningless jargon. To the medical research world, it was a declaration of war. These patent applications were for Elijah's revolutionary synthetic antibody technology that could potentially render obsolete entire categories of traditional antibiotics. His original filing had stated his intent was to partner broadly across the healthcare industry. This email was his official notification that his intent was changing. He began to write, his fingers a blur across the keyboard. His prose was not angry or emotional. It was precise, scientific, and utterly damning. To whom it may concern, please be advised that Washington Medical Research, LLC, the beneficial owner of patent applications US 10763285B2 and PCT US 2023-015789 covering novel synthetic antibody technologies, is hereby amending its partnership strategy effective immediately. Our partnership plans are no longer deemed inclusive of MedCore Industries. Washington Medical Research had previously prepared a private proposal titled Project Hippocrates to be delivered to the Research Directorate of MedCore Industries. This proposal outlined a friendly, collaborative path toward significant public health advancement through operational improvements and strategic realignment. We had intended to work with the current research team to realize the technology's full potential in addressing multi-drug-resistant infections. He paused, then typed the paragraph that would seal the company's fate. However, due to a recent direct and irreconcilable experience with the company's frontline management, which has revealed a corporate culture of such profound dysfunction and systemic incompetence as to render our previous proposal untenable, we have lost all faith in the current leadership's ability to execute any meaningful public health initiative. The operational risks and patient safety liabilities are, in our professional judgment, far greater than previously understood. Therefore, Washington Medical Research is formally withdrawing its partnership proposal with MedCore Industries. We now believe that the only viable path to protecting our intellectual property and maximizing public health impact is through a complete and total redirection of our partnership strategy toward more culturally competent and scientifically rigorous institutions. We intend to pursue any and all avenues necessary to effect such a change, including but not limited to the immediate redirection of our technology to MedCore's competitors and government health institutions. He attached 2 documents to the email. The first was his original optimistic Project Hippocrates white paper. The second was the newly titled document, Project Asclepius, a case for strategic redirection of synthetic antibody technology away from MedCore Industries, Inc. Project Asclepius was not merely a revision of Project Hippocrates. It was a complete reimagining of his research's future, one that explicitly excluded MedCore Industries from any access to his potentially life-saving technology. Where Hippocrates had proposed gradual implementation in collaboration with existing healthcare leaders, Asclepius called for immediate, radical transformation. It detailed plans for redirecting his research partnerships to MedCore's 3 largest competitors, establishing new research collaborations with leading government health institutions, and implementing a comprehensive patent protection strategy that would prevent MedCore from developing competing technologies. The scientific models showed that the short-term disruption would be significant, but that the long-term benefits, both to public health outcomes and scientific advancement, would be transformative. The document was a vision not just of more effective medical technology, but of a fundamentally different way of conducting healthcare research. Elijah read the email over once, his expression unreadable. He had just turned his meticulously researched plan to collaborate with the company into a weapon for its scientific exclusion. The public humiliation at reception had been answered with a formal declaration of technological war. His fingers hovered over the send button for a heartbeat, not out of hesitation, but to savor the quiet dignity of justice about to unfold. In this moment, he felt a rare sense of complete alignment between his personal values and his professional purpose. Monica Peters and Dr. Collins had no idea they had just changed the course of multi-billion-dollar healthcare research. "You judge by appearance," he whispered to himself. "I judge by performance. That's why I'll control this technology, and you'll be looking for new research to pursue." He hit send. The email, carrying its payload of medical research dynamite, shot from his laptop into the secure servers of the world's most powerful health institutions. The partnership redirection would not be made public until the following morning, but the fuse had been lit. He closed his laptop, packed it back into his messenger bag, and stood up. He did not look back at the reception desk, where the same gatekeepers continued their daily ritual of judgment. He simply walked away, disappearing into the anonymous river of the medical campus crowd. He had missed his meeting with Dr. Jackson, but he had just booked a one-way ticket to the complete and total control of revolutionary medical technology. The world of medical research operates on two clocks. There is the official clock of the scientific journals, the methodical peer review process, the cautious advancement of knowledge. And then there is the shadow clock, the relentless 24/7 flow of information, discoveries, and whispers that moves through the encrypted channels and private networks of the world's most influential medical researchers. While the scientific establishment slept, the tremor of Elijah Washington's email began to propagate through this shadow world. The first to feel it was the legal team at the National Institutes of Health. An automated system flagged the partnership redirection from Washington Medical Research as a material event for a major healthcare research initiative. A senior science policy officer was automatically notified. She read the email, her eyes widening. A groundbreaking technology redirecting away from a major pharmaceutical company. This was huge. She knew that when the morning came, all hell was going to break loose. The attorney forwarded the email to her supervisor with a simple note. "This will move healthcare markets tomorrow. Washington is redirecting his technology away from MedCore." The next ripple reached the New England Journal of Medicine. Sarah Gonzalez, still seething from her encounter with Dr. Collins, had immediately filed a report with her editor on a secure line. "Dr. Washington was just barred from a MedCore meeting," she'd said, her voice electric with the thrill of the scoop. "Their staff treated him like an intruder. I have a feeling he's not going to take this well." Her editor, recognizing the significance, immediately assigned a team to start digging into Washington Medical Research's patent portfolio. By midnight, they had confirmed through sources that Washington held revolutionary antibody technology patents that MedCore had been courting. By 1 a.m., they had a draft article ready to publish the moment markets opened. Medical researcher Dr. Elijah Washington redirects breakthrough antibody technology away from MedCore. Sources report complete partnership dissolution. For Sarah, this story resonated on a personal level. 6 years earlier, as a junior medical correspondent, she'd been prevented from entering an exclusive healthcare conference despite having valid press credentials. "You must be lost, honey. The nursing convention is in the next building," the security guard had said. When she'd finally been allowed in after her editor intervened, she'd missed a crucial research presentation. That experience had fueled her determination to spotlight the invisible barriers that prevented qualified people from claiming their rightful seats at the table, whether in a conference hall or in a corporate reception area. The most significant tremor, however, was a direct result of Elijah's own quiet strategic machinations. After sending his email to the health institutions, he made one phone call. It was to an old trusted contact, a woman named Dr. Maria Chen, who hosted a popular medical innovation podcast with a devoted following of healthcare professionals. "Maria, it's Elijah Washington," he said when the call connected. "The miracle antibody man himself. To what do I owe this honor?" I'm redirecting my research away from MedCore tomorrow. I'd like to come on your show to explain why. There was a moment of stunned silence on the line. Elijah Washington, who had declined every interview request for the past 3 years, was offering an exclusive. This was the medical media equivalent of scientific gold. "What happened?" Maria asked, her journalistic instincts kicking in. Their receptionist and associate director denied me entry to a scheduled meeting with their research director today because I was wearing a university sweatshirt. They created a fictional security code to justify it. When a New England Journal reporter attempted to intervene, they threatened to call security on her. Maria let out a low whistle. "And this was you, Dr. Elijah Washington?" "They had no idea who I was," Elijah replied. "That's the point. Their culture is so toxic they treat anyone they deem unworthy with contempt. It's not just a cultural issue. It's a scientific integrity failure. Tomorrow night, prime time, we'll give you the full hour," Maria promised. By 6 a.m., the medical research world was fully awake, and the story was spreading like wildfire. Medical news networks, healthcare blogs, and industry forums all led with the news. Social media platforms were flooded with speculation about what this meant for MedCore's future. The pre-market trading activity for MedCore Industries stock was frantic. The shares, which had closed the previous day at $127.50, opened for pre-market trading down 8%. By 7 a.m., they were down 15%. By 8 a.m., as more details emerged about the incident at reception, the stock was down 22%. All of this happened while most of MedCore's management was still asleep, unaware that their company was hemorrhaging value by the minute. Sarah Gonzalez, who had barely slept, published her article at 7:15 a.m. It was devastating in its precision. Pioneering medical researcher Dr. Elijah Washington was reportedly denied entry to a scheduled meeting at MedCore Industries yesterday afternoon, despite holding a valid appointment. According to witnesses, reception staff questioned the legitimacy of his credentials and created a fictional security code to justify their actions. Sources close to Washington cite this incident as the catalyst for Washington Medical Research's shift from a friendly to hostile stance toward the healthcare giant. One witness described the receptionist's behavior as textbook discrimination based on appearance. Washington, wearing casual clothing at the time, was told he didn't meet the standards for the executive research area. At 7:30 a.m., medical news networks announced that Elijah Washington would be making a rare live television appearance on Dr. Maria Chen's show that evening. The stock, already in freefall, dropped another 5% on the news. By the time the opening bell rang at the New York Stock Exchange at 9:30 a.m., MedCore Industries had already lost over $400 million in market capitalization, and the regular trading day hadn't even begun. Richard Jackson, director of research at MedCore Industries, was awakened at 6:17 a.m. by his phone's insistent ringing. The caller ID showed his chief medical officer, Dr. Barbara Walsh. "Barbara, it's not even 6:30, Jackson mumbled, still half asleep. "Richard, you need to get to the office right now." Walsh's voice was tight with panic. "We're under attack." "What are you talking about?" "Washington Medical Research, Elijah Washington. He's redirecting his antibody technology. Our stock is down 20% in pre-market, and it's still falling. There's some incident with him being denied entry to your meeting yesterday. The medical press is all over it." Jackson sat bolt upright, sleep forgotten. "What incident? What are you talking about?" "I don't have details yet. All I know is Washington was supposed to be in your office at 2 o'clock yesterday, and something happened at reception. Now he's filed a formal notice redirecting his technology to our competitors, and he's going on Dr. Chen's show tonight to talk about it." "Jesus Christ," Jackson muttered. "I'll be there in 30 minutes. Call an emergency executive committee meeting for 8 a.m. and get our partnership development team on the phone with Washington Medical Research immediately." By 8 a.m., MedCore Industries' executive suite was a scene of barely controlled chaos. The company's top executives sat around the polished mahogany table in the main boardroom, faces pale with shock as they watched the medical news on multiple screens. Their stock, which had closed at $127.50 the previous day, had opened for regular trading at $98.75 and was continuing to fall. Over $500 million in market capitalization had evaporated in less than 2 hours. What the hell happened? Dr. Jackson demanded, looking around the table. How did we not know Washington was redirecting his research? And what is this incident everyone's talking about? The head of partnership development, a young, ambitious executive named Michael Peterson, looked like he was about to be sick. His technology is revolutionary, potentially the biggest breakthrough in infection control since penicillin. We've been pursuing this partnership for months. All our interactions with his team have been positive. We had no idea he was planning this redirection. What about this reception incident? Jackson pressed. We're still trying to get details. The VP of Operations, Diane Martinez, replied. It happened at our main reception desk yesterday afternoon. Washington was apparently denied entry to your 2 o'clock meeting. We've requested the security footage. Find out what happened, Jackson roared. I want a full report on every interaction we've had with Washington in the last 48 hours. Someone get me the names of the staff involved. The order sent a wave of panic through the executive suite as assistants began a frantic search for answers. They were looking in the wrong place. The answer was not in a boardroom or a financial report. The answer was in a trivial, forgotten incident report from a receptionist named Monica Peters and an associate director named Dr. Matthew Collins, a report that likely described a disruptive visitor with a security clearance issue. As the executives struggled to understand what was happening, Barbara Walsh, the chief medical officer, cleared her throat. Richard, there's something else you should know. Washington isn't just redirecting his research away from us, he's actively approaching our 3 main competitors. Jackson's face drained of color. What? His amended patent strategy specifically mentions NovaCare, Biogen Health, and Pacific Medical Systems as his preferred partners. He's already filed preliminary partnership agreements with all 3. That's tomorrow's entire medical future, Jackson whispered, the implications sinking in. The room fell silent as the executives contemplated the gravity of their situation. On the screens surrounding them, medical analysts were already declaring MedCore scientifically vulnerable, the euphemism used when a healthcare company had essentially lost control of its research destiny. We need to call an emergency board meeting today, and someone get our patent counsel on the line. We need to understand our options for defending against this, Jackson said, his voice hollow. As if on cue, Jackson's assistant entered the room with a printout. Sir, we've located the incident report from reception and identified the visitor as Dr. Elijah Washington. The report states he was non-compliant with visitor protocols and left the building voluntarily. Jackson scanned the report, his expression growing increasingly horrified as he realized the catastrophic disconnect between the anodyne language of the report and the $500 million market reaction it had triggered. At that moment, his phone rang. It was Amanda Singh, one of the board members who had championed bringing Washington's technology to MedCore. Her voice was cold with fury. Richard, what the hell is going on? I just got off the phone with Washington's chief researcher. He says Washington was denied entry to your meeting yesterday because your staff didn't think he looked professional enough. Is that true? Amanda, we're still gathering facts. Save it, she cut him off. Washington was coming to us as a potential partner. He had a comprehensive plan to help us implement his synthetic antibody technology, and your people humiliated him in public. Do you have any idea what you've done? Jackson couldn't answer. The final horrifying puzzle piece clicked into place. The non-compliant visitor in the incident report was Dr. Elijah Washington. The $500 million reckoning was not a random market event. It was a direct, personal, and devastatingly effective response to the actions of 2 of his own employees. Just as this realization was sinking in, his private line rang. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize. Jackson, he answered tentatively. Dr. Jackson, this is Dr. Elijah Washington. The voice was calm, measured, without a hint of anger or triumph. The room fell silent. Jackson motioned frantically for someone to put the call on speaker. Dr. Washington, I was just about to reach out to you. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. No, Dr. Jackson, there hasn't been. Elijah interrupted smoothly. What happened yesterday wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a revelation. Your company didn't have a visitor access failure. It had a culture failure, and culture flows from the top. Jackson struggled to find a response. I want to personally apologize. I'm not interested in apologies, Elijah cut in. I'm interested in transformation. The difference is significant. We can work together on this. Jackson pleaded, aware that his entire career was hanging by a thread. Whatever changes you want to make. That's precisely the problem, Dr. Jackson. The changes I want to make begin with where my life-saving research is implemented. I'll be discussing the specifics on Dr. Chen's show tonight. I just wanted to extend the professional courtesy of speaking with you directly first. Elijah, please. It's done, Richard. You've been running this research department like a private club, where the staff decides who belongs and who doesn't. That ends today. My research will save lives regardless of which company implements it. I suggest you use this time to prepare your explanation to shareholders and update your resume. The line went dead. Jackson slowly lowered the phone, his face a mask of utter defeat. Get me Monica Peters and Dr. Collins's employee files, he said, his voice a hollow whisper, and get our legal team in here. We need to prepare for a scientific exodus that we have absolutely no chance of stopping. The reckoning was not just financial, it was personal. In that moment, Richard Jackson knew his career as the director of research at MedCore was over. He had been a dead man walking for months, and 2 of his lowest-level employees had just signed his corporate death certificate. Monica Peters and Dr. Matthew Collins arrived for their shift the following afternoon, still wrapped in a cocoon of self-righteous ignorance. They had logged the incident with the, quote, disruptive visitor, confident they had done their duty, upheld the company's standards, and protected the sanctity of their executive research area. They were sharing coffee in the employee break room, Monica recounting how she had saved Dr. Jackson's valuable time from someone who clearly didn't belong in the executive research suite. Did you see that sweatshirt? Probably got it at a university gift shop, she snickered. As if someone dressed like that could be a leading medical researcher. Dr. Collins nodded with half-hearted agreement. He'd spent the morning vaguely unsettled, the confident precision of the visitor's questions about security protocols lingering in his mind. There had been something about the man's composure that didn't fit the difficult visitor profile, but he pushed these doubts aside. Admitting uncertainty would mean acknowledging a mistake. Their conversation halted abruptly when a woman they had never seen before entered. She was in her 50s with a severe haircut and an aura of absolute no-nonsense authority. She was flanked by 2 imposing men from corporate security. Her name badge identified her as Dr. Elena Morales, Vice President of Research Integrity. Monica Peters, Dr. Matthew Collins, she asked, her voice leaving no room for pleasantries. They nodded, confused by the unexpected appearance of such a high-ranking executive. Please come with me immediately, Elena said. It was not a request. Elena herself had been fighting battles against discrimination her entire career. She'd started as a lab technician 30 years ago, the first Latina woman in her department, and had faced her own mountain of "you don't belong here" moments. She had climbed to her current position through a combination of exceptional competence and relentless determination. The footage she'd reviewed of Elijah Washington's treatment had made her physically ill. It was everything she'd fought against for 3 decades playing out in high-definition video. They were led not to the HR director's office for a routine debrief, but to a sterile, unused conference room in the building's administrative wing. The room had no windows and smelled of stale air. On the large television monitor on the wall, a live feed of CNBC was playing, the volume muted. The screen was a sea of red, with the ticker symbol MCI at the center of the carnage, bright, angry digits showing a 32.4% decline. Elena Morales gestured for them to sit. She remained standing, her posture rigid with controlled fury. "Before we begin," she said, her voice as cold as the polished table between them, "I want you both to understand the context of this conversation." She unmuted the television. A medical analyst's frantic voice filled the room. "An absolute bloodbath for MedCore Industries, Rebecca. We are looking at a loss of market capitalization that is now north of $600 million, and the market has only been open for 3 hours. This all stems from the bombshell news that legendary medical researcher Dr. Elijah Washington is redirecting his synthetic antibody technology away from MedCore to their competitors. The question on everyone's mind is what on earth could have happened to turn a potential friendly partner into a scientific adversary overnight." Elena muted the television again, the silence in the room now deafening. She slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was a high-resolution professional headshot of a calm, intense-looking black man. It was Elijah Washington. "This man," Elena said, her voice a low, controlled fury, "is the disruptive visitor you dealt with at reception yesterday afternoon. He is the founder of Washington Medical Research, and he is the creator of a synthetic antibody technology that could save millions of lives. The $600 million loss you see on that screen is a direct, quantifiable result of your interaction with him." Monica stared at the photo, her face draining of color. The world, which had seemed so simple and orderly just minutes before, was tilting on its axis. The man in the university sweatshirt, the man she had judged and dismissed, was the pioneering researcher they had all whispered about in research briefings. Dr. Collins looked like he was going to vomit, his procedural certainty and bureaucratic shield shattered, revealing the terrified, small-minded man beneath. "This wasn't about security protocols," Elena continued, her voice razor-sharp. "It was about your prejudice, and it just cost us $600 million. She slid 2 thick envelopes across the table. "Your employment with MedCore Industries is terminated, effective immediately. This is not a disciplinary action. It is an act of corporate survival. Your actions constitute gross negligence, resulting in catastrophic financial and reputational damages. Your professional associations have been briefed and have declined to contest the termination. Corporate security will escort you to your lockers to retrieve your personal effects, and then they will escort you off company property. You are now considered a security risk to this company's continued operation." Monica finally found her voice, a high-pitched, hysterical squeak. "You can't do this! I was doing my job." "He was dressed like a—" Elena cut her off, her eyes blazing. "He was dressed like one of the most brilliant medical researchers of our generation, and you were too blinded to see it. That is why you are fired." The finality in her voice was absolute. The personal reckoning was over. But for MedCore Industries, the corporate reckoning was just beginning. Dr. Collins, his face ashen, stared at the envelope containing his termination papers. "I have a family," he whispered. "I have a mortgage." "You should have thought of that before you invented a fictional security code to deny entry to the man who now effectively controls this company's scientific future," Elena replied, unmoved. "Your actions have endangered the livelihoods of over 15,000 MedCore employees. Your concern for your mortgage comes approximately 24 hours too late." Monica's defensive posture suddenly crumbled. The reality of what had happened, of what she had caused, finally broke through her shield of self-justification. "We didn't know," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "How were we supposed to know who he was?" Elena's expression softened slightly, not with sympathy, but with a sad recognition of the deeper truth. "That's precisely the point, Ms. Peters. You weren't supposed to know. You were supposed to treat every visitor with respect and dignity, regardless of who they might be. The fact that you only regret your actions because the visitor turned out to be powerful, that's exactly the problem Dr. Washington is now determined to fix." Monica and Dr. Collins sat in stunned silence, the full weight of their actions finally sinking in. They had not merely lost their jobs. They had become cautionary tales in the medical industry, the employees whose biased judgment had cost their company $500 million in a single day. "One last thing," Elena said as she prepared to leave them to the corporate security team. "Dr. Washington has made it clear in his public statements that this isn't just about him. It's about a pattern of behavior he observed throughout our facility. So before you convince yourselves that this is just bad luck or being in the wrong place at the wrong time, I want you to really think about how many other visitors you've treated this way. Because this isn't about one incident. It's about who you chose to be every day you wore that badge." With that, she left the room, leaving Monica and Dr. Collins to face not just the end of their careers, but the harsh mirror of self-reflection. 6 months later, Monica Peters found herself sitting at her desk at New Beginnings, a nonprofit organization focused on career development for underserved communities in healthcare. After weeks of unemployment and soul-searching, she had applied for an administrative position there, expecting rejection. To her surprise, the director, a black woman who had faced her own barriers in medical research, had hired her, saying simply, "We all deserve a second chance to get it right." Today, Monica was reviewing applications for their Research for All program, which provided mentorship and networking opportunities to promising medical researchers from disadvantaged backgrounds. As she sorted through the forms, she couldn't help but think about how far she had come from her days of judging people by their appearance. The door to her office opened, and her supervisor poked her head in. "Monica, there's someone here to see the program. Could you give them a tour?" She nodded and walked to the reception area, stopping short when she saw who was waiting. Dr. Elijah Washington stood there, dressed in his signature casual style, jeans and a university sweatshirt. "Dr. Washington," she managed, her voice barely audible. He turned, recognition flickering in his eyes. "Miss Peters." The silence between them was heavy with history. Finally, she spoke. "I want to thank you for not using my name in the press. You could have destroyed me completely." "That wasn't my goal," he replied simply. "I know that now." She hesitated. "Would you like to see what we do here?" He nodded, and she led him through the facility, explaining their programs with growing confidence. As they walked, she found herself sharing her journey. "After everything happened, I couldn't find work for months. No medical facility would touch me. I had a lot of time to think about what I'd done and who I'd been." She paused. "I realized I'd spent my whole career building walls instead of bridges." Elijah looked at her thoughtfully. "And now," she continued, "now I'm trying to help others cross the bridges I once guarded." She gestured to the classroom where a workshop was in progress. "We teach people that their worth isn't determined by their appearance. The irony isn't lost on me." As they finished the tour, Elijah handed her his business card. "We are launching a mentorship program at Washington Medical Research for young people from diverse backgrounds. Your perspective might be valuable. If you're interested, give me a call." She took the card, stunned by the unexpected offer of redemption. "Why would you trust me after what I did?" "Because people who have learned from their mistakes often make the best teachers," he said simply. "The question is whether you've really learned." "I have," she said quietly. "More than I ever wanted to." As he turned to leave, she called after him. "Dr. Washington, thank you for the second chance. Not everyone gets one." He nodded once. "Make it count, Miss Peters." Meanwhile, at MedCore Industries' Atlanta headquarters, the corporate reckoning had been equally brutal. CEO Thomas Harrison, after watching his company's value get annihilated, had convened an emergency board meeting at dawn. Victoria Blackwell, a powerful board member and former medical researcher herself, did not hold back. "Thomas," her voice crackled over the speakerphone, sharp and unforgiving. "Let me be blunt. For 2 years, this board has been telling you that your company culture was toxic, that our research partnerships were at risk, and that we were vulnerable. You assured us you had it under control. You told us your partnership development team was building a constructive dialogue with Washington Medical Research. Now we learned that while you were building dialogue, your reception staff was busy burning bridges with the most important medical researcher of the decade. This isn't just an incident. It's an indictment of your entire leadership approach." Harrison sat in his lavish office, the speakerphone a small black box delivering his corporate death sentence. He had spent a lifetime climbing to the top of this mountain, and in the space of a single day he had been thrown off the summit by a receptionist and an associate director. "We have procedures for dealing with this sort of thing," he tried, his voice lacking conviction. "Our crisis management plan is wholly inadequate for what we're facing," another board member interrupted. "This isn't a PR crisis, Thomas. It's an existential threat. Washington has redirected his research. You know he has the patents. Every major healthcare company is lining up behind him. They see his track record of breakthrough innovations, and they see our stock price down 70% over 3 years. This isn't a fight we can win." Harrison knew it was true. The preliminary assessment his team had run showed that Washington's patents were ironclad. The math was brutally simple. "The board has lost all confidence in you," Victoria Blackwell continued. "We will be accepting your resignation effective by the end of the day. We've already contacted executive search firms to begin looking for your replacement, though I suspect our future direction will ultimately be decided by whoever acquires what's left of this company." There was no debate, no discussion. The decision had been made before the call even began. Harrison was merely being informed of his fate. "And what about the rest of the executive team?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "They'll be evaluated by the new CEO," Victoria replied. her tone making it clear what that evaluation was likely to conclude, but I wouldn't encourage any of them to make long-term plans with the company. The call ended with the clinical efficiency of an execution. Harrison sat alone in his office, surrounded by the trappings of corporate power that had, in the space of 24 hours, become meaningless. On his wall hung a magazine cover from 3 years earlier featuring his smiling face above the headline, "The Cure Curator: How Thomas Harrison is Reinventing Medical Research." The irony was bitter. His executive assistant knocked gently on the door. "Sir, the press release about your resignation is ready for your approval." He didn't bother to read it. Whatever it said, whatever face-saving platitudes had been crafted, the truth was already public knowledge. He had been outmaneuvered and outclassed by a man in a university sweatshirt whom his own employees had deemed unworthy of entering his office. "Send it," he said quietly. Within minutes, the announcement hit the news wires. MedCore Industries CEO Thomas Harrison steps down amid research partnership crisis. The stock, which had been in freefall all day, briefly stabilized on the news. The market had expected this outcome and had already priced it in. Harrison began clearing his desk, placing personal items in a cardboard box provided by HR, 30 years in the industry, reduced to a box of mementos and a severance package. As he removed a framed photo of himself with the company's founder, his phone rang. It was Luis Fernandez, one of the board members Elijah Washington had been traveling to meet. "Thomas," Luis said, his voice grave, "I've just gotten off the phone with Washington. He's agreed to meet with the board tomorrow to discuss next steps." "And what did he say?" Harrison couldn't help asking. There was a pause on the line. He said, "I'm not interested in revenge. I'm interested in transformation. There's a difference." After Harrison hung up, he looked around his office one last time. The view from the 37th floor showed Atlanta's skyline with several MedCore research facilities visible in the distance. He had once believed those buildings were his legacy. Now he understood that his true legacy would be as a case study in how quickly power can evaporate when built on a foundation of institutional arrogance. He picked up his box and walked to the door. As he reached for the handle, it opened from the other side. Elijah Washington stood in the doorway. Harrison froze. The box of belongings clutched against his chest like a shield. He hadn't expected to face Washington in person. Certainly not here. "Not now. Dr. Washington," he stammered. I didn't know you were in the building." Elijah's expression was unreadable. He was dressed in a simple charcoal suit with no tie. Professional but understated. "I thought we should meet, Mr. Harrison. One healthcare leader to another. Or rather, one healthcare leader to a former healthcare leader." Harrison swallowed hard. "Of course. Please come in." Elijah stepped into the office but remained standing. "I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to ask you one question." "Anything," Harrison replied, desperate to salvage some dignity from the encounter. "Why did you build a company where people like Monica Peters and Dr. Collins felt empowered to act the way they did?" Harrison blinked, surprised by the question. He had expected accusations, demands, perhaps even gloating. Not this calm inquiry into root causes. I didn't. Their behavior was completely unacceptable. It violated our policies." "No," Elijah interrupted gently. "Their behavior was the natural result of your policies. The culture you created made their actions not just possible, but inevitable." Harrison had no response. For the first time, he was being forced to confront the reality that the incident at reception wasn't an aberration. It was a symptom. "I'll tell you what I think," Elijah continued. "I think you built a company focused on the appearance of innovation rather than the substance of discovery. I think you created a culture where employees believe their job is to keep people out rather than welcome ideas in. And I think you did it because deep down, you believe the same thing they do, that worth is determined by how someone looks, not who they are or what contributions they might make." The words hit Harrison like physical blows, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. "What happens now?" he asked quietly. "Now," Elijah replied, "I rebuild the healthcare ecosystem into something better. Not just more profitable, though it will be that too, but better in the ways that actually matter, more equitable, more respectful, more human." He stepped aside to allow Harrison to exit. "Good luck, Mr. Harrison. I hope your next job teaches you what this one couldn't." that leadership isn't about corner offices and magazine covers. It's about the culture you create and the values you embody. Harrison nodded mutely and walked past Elijah out of the office that was no longer his. The nameplate on the door would, by morning, bear someone else's name. 2 days later, Harrison found himself sitting in a coffee shop near his home, scrolling through job listings on his tablet. The medical press had been brutal, portraying him as the architect of his own downfall. Former colleagues weren't returning his calls, 30 years of networking, and suddenly he couldn't get past receptionists. A shadow fell across his table, and he looked up to see a man in casual clothes standing there. Jeans, sneakers, and a university sweatshirt. For a moment, he didn't recognize him without the business suit. "May I join you?" Elijah Washington asked. Harrison gestured to the empty chair, too surprised to speak. Elijah sat down, placing a coffee cup on the table. "I was in the neighborhood for meetings and saw you through the window." "Checking up on me?" Harrison asked, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. "Actually, I came to make you an offer." Harrison's eyebrows rose. "What kind of offer?" "A consulting position. 6 months? Well compensated. I want you to document every mistake you made at MedCore, every policy that enabled discrimination, every system that prioritized appearance over substance. You want me to write my own professional obituary. I want you to create a roadmap for other healthcare leaders to avoid your mistakes." Elijah leaned forward. "Your legacy doesn't have to be failure, Thomas. It could be the lessons that prevent others from failing the same way." Harrison stared at him, searching for mockery or malice and finding none. "Why would you offer me this after what happened?" "Because bridges are more useful than barriers," Elijah replied. "And because sometimes the people who created the problem have the clearest insight into how to fix it, once they actually see the problem." Quote. Harrison was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. "I'll do it." As they shook hands, Harrison realized that Elijah Washington had given him something his own company never had: dignity in the face of failure. The irony wasn't lost on him. The true battle, however, was not fought in conference rooms or boardrooms. It was fought in the court of public and medical opinion, and Elijah Washington was its undisputed master. That evening, he walked onto the set of Dr. Maria Chen's medical innovation show, not with the swagger of a scientific conqueror, but with the quiet, authoritative calm of a reformer. He was dressed in a simple charcoal suit, white shirt, no tie, professional but understated. This was a deliberate choice. He wasn't there to gloat or to play the part of the vengeful researcher. He was there to lay out a vision. "Welcome to the show, Dr. Washington," Maria began. "I have to say, in the 15 years I've been covering medical innovation, I've never seen a company lose $500 million in market cap because they wouldn't let someone into a meeting." "What happened?" Elijah smiled slightly. "Let me be clear, Maria. This isn't about a meeting. This is about a systematic failure of scientific culture. What happened to me was merely a symptom of a much deeper disease at MedCore." He never once mentioned the incident at reception directly. He knew that would make him look petty and vengeful. Instead, he used his national television platform to deliver a devastating data-driven critique of MedCore Industries. "Let's look at the facts," he said, gesturing to a chart that appeared on screen. Research partnership success rate down 47% over 3 years. Scientific staff turnover up 62%. Breakthrough discovery ranking fallen from 3rd in the industry to 14th. These aren't just numbers. They're evidence of a company that has lost its way. He spoke of inefficient research funding allocation, bloated executive compensation packages, and the company's abysmal diversity statistics. He presented his case with the passion of a man who genuinely believed he could fix a great American healthcare company that had lost its way. "This isn't about hostility," Elijah said, his voice calm and reasonable. "This is about accountability. The current management has been asleep at the wheel, while this company's scientific integrity has eroded. The shareholders have been ignored, the researchers have been demoralized, and the patients have been forgotten. My plan, Project Asclepius, is not about destroying MedCore. It's about forcing medical research to be reborn. It's about creating healthcare partnerships that are effective, not in spite of their inclusivity, but because of it." It was a brilliant performance. He was framing his research redirection not as an act of aggression, but as an act of salvation. He was positioning himself as the champion of everyone the old guard had failed: shareholders, employees, and patients. You have to understand, he continued, when I see a receptionist inventing fictional security codes to keep someone out of a research meeting based on how they're dressed, I don't just see a visitor access failure. I see a governance failure. I see a culture that has been allowed to prioritize exclusion over discovery. And that starts at the top. Maria leaned forward. Your critics say this is personal, that you're angry about being denied entry and you're using your scientific leverage to get revenge. Elijah's expression remained serene. I didn't use my leverage yesterday when it would have been easy to do so. I didn't call the CEO. I didn't throw my credentials around. I simply observed and documented a systematic failure. What I'm doing now isn't revenge. It's responsibility. As the creator of potentially life-saving technology, I have a moral duty to ensure it reaches patients through the most effective channels possible. The current MedCore leadership has proven they cannot be trusted with that responsibility. The difference between revenge and reformation, he added, is that revenge looks backward. Reformation looks forward. I'm not interested in punishing MedCore for what happened yesterday. I'm interested in transforming healthcare for what can happen tomorrow. The interview continued for nearly an hour, with Elijah methodically laying out his vision for a transformed medical research ecosystem. He spoke of inclusive research partnerships, patient-centric discovery protocols, and efficient implementation pathways. He discussed his new partnerships with MedCore's competitors, companies with proven track records in research integrity and scientific advancement. I'm not just redirecting research, he explained. I'm redirecting a mindset. The old MedCore believed that innovation meant exclusivity, keeping the wrong people out. The new healthcare paradigm will understand that true innovation means inclusivity, making everyone feel valued as potential contributors. He outlined a bold plan for diversity and inclusion that went far beyond the typical corporate platitudes. He described concrete metrics for measuring progress, leadership development programs for underrepresented groups, and a complete overhaul of hiring practices to eliminate bias. This isn't just the right thing to do ethically, it's the right thing to do scientifically, he explained. A diverse research team better reflects and understands diverse patient populations. It innovates more effectively. It solves problems more creatively. The data on this is clear. By the time the interview ended, the narrative had been completely reframed. This wasn't a story about an angry researcher lashing out. It was a story about a visionary leader stepping in to save medical innovation from itself. The response was immediate and overwhelming. MedCore stock, which had closed down 34% for the day, continued to fall in after-hours trading. Medical analysts who had been skeptical of such a dramatic move began to issue cautiously optimistic reports about the potential value of Washington's approach. Social media erupted with current and former MedCore employees sharing their own stories of toxic management and counterproductive policies. #BuildHealthcare began trending, with medical professionals adding their experiences of elitism and arbitrary barriers in research institutions. The healthcare transformation that followed was a radical act of scientific re-engineering. 6 months after the reception incident, MedCore Industries had been acquired by NovaCare, one of Elijah's new partners. The combined entity, rebranded as Horizon Health Sciences, implemented Elijah's vision for inclusive, patient-centered research. Elijah's first official act as chief scientific advisor was not to meet with executives in their lavish boardroom. Instead, he visited the company's largest research facility in Boston. He bypassed the executive offices and went straight to the laboratory floor, the very heart of the company's scientific operations. He held a town hall meeting with over 300 researchers, lab technicians, and scientific staff. He stood on a makeshift stage and spoke to them not as a distant celebrity scientist, but as their partner in discovery. "I'm Elijah Washington," he began, his voice carrying easily through the crowded room. 3 days ago, I was denied entry to a meeting because a receptionist didn't think I looked like I belonged in the executive research area. A murmur ran through the crowd. By now, everyone had heard the story, though few had expected him to address it so directly. I could have shown my credentials. I could have made a scene. I could have called the CEO. But I didn't, because I wanted to experience this research institution exactly as others do. And what I experienced was a culture that had lost its way. He paused, looking around the room at the faces staring back at him, some wary, some hopeful. all attentive. "I'm not here to blame you. You've been operating in a system that was designed to fail." The old management believed that success came from gatekeeping, from treating medical knowledge like a private club rather than a public good, and from enforcing hierarchies rather than empowering innovation. He told them the unvarnished truth about the company's near-death experience. And then he announced his first major policy change. The old management believed that you, the frontline researchers, were resources to be managed. He declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "I believe you are our single greatest asset. That is why, effective today, I am implementing a groundbreaking open-access research model. Your work will be recognized and rewarded based on merit, not pedigree. From this moment on, you are not just employees of Horizon Health Sciences. You are co-creators of the future of medicine." The stunned silence was followed by a wave of cautious, then thunderous applause. For the first time in years, these demoralized, overlooked scientists felt a sense of hope. A researcher named Maria, who had been with the company for 23 years, raised her hand. "Sir, does this mean we'll have a say in research priorities?" "That's exactly what it means," Elijah replied. "Starting next month, we're creating scientific advisory councils at every research center. These councils will have direct input into everything from funding allocations to implementation strategies. You know this science better than anyone. It's time we started listening to you." Another employee, a lab technician named Jamal, spoke up. "What about the credential hierarchy? Some of us have been overlooked for years despite contributing breakthrough ideas, while others with the right degrees but mediocre results get all the credit." Elijah smiled. The first merit-based advancement policy was issued this morning. It now evaluates actual contributions rather than pedigree. Innovation matters. Arbitrary credentials don't. One by one he addressed their concerns, not with vague promises but with specific plans already in motion. By the end of the town hall, the mood had transformed from skepticism to cautious optimism. Elijah's second act was to hire Sarah Gonzalez, the medical correspondent who had witnessed his treatment at MedCore. He met with her in his temporary office, a glass-walled space he had set up in the middle of the main research floor. "Sarah," he said, "your attempt to intervene at reception told me everything I need to know about your character. This company needs a new story. The old story was about exclusion and elitism. The new story is about inclusion and innovation. I need a storyteller who understands the difference because she saw it firsthand. I want you to be our new Vice President of Scientific Communication." Sarah, stunned and honored, accepted on the spot. Her first assignment was to craft a public message explaining the new Horizon Health Sciences to the world. "I almost couldn't believe it when you offered me this job," she admitted. 7 years ago, I was kept out of a medical conference because the guard didn't believe I was a journalist. I had to call my editor to vouch for me." Elijah nodded in understanding. "That's exactly why you're the right person for this role. You understand what it feels like to be told you don't belong, and you know why we need to build something different." The centerpiece of the new culture was a training program born from the ashes of the reception incident. It was called the Innovation Standard. Every single employee was required to attend. They learned about scientific discovery pathways. They learned about the impact of inclusive research on patient outcomes. And they were taught a simple guiding principle. Every person, from the janitor to the CEO, was to be treated as a potential source of the next breakthrough idea. The training program was like nothing the medical industry had ever seen. On the first day, executives and research staff alike were required to check in for a mock research conference wearing casual clothes. Half were randomly selected to be treated with suspicion and disdain by trained actors. The other half received respectful, dignified treatment. Afterward, they discussed how each experience made them feel and the scientific implications of those feelings. The true test of scientific integrity, Elijah told the first group of trainees, is not how you treat people whose credentials you recognize. It's how you treat people whose potential you don't yet understand. We will build a company where everyone is treated with dignity, not because they might be famous researchers, but because they're human beings with potentially valuable ideas. In the executive suite, the transformation was equally dramatic. The old guard was replaced with a diverse team of industry veterans and innovative outsiders. The new CEO, Dr. Rachel Torres, was a respected epidemiologist with a background in both academic research and public health. Her mandate was clear: rebuild Horizon Health Sciences from the ground up, with a culture centered on scientific integrity, inclusivity, and excellence. For her first week, Rachel worked incognito alongside lab technicians, administrative staff, and facility maintenance workers, experiencing firsthand the challenges frontline employees face daily. When she finally addressed the company as CEO, she did so with a deep understanding of the operational reality, not just the financial spreadsheets. "Leadership isn't about telling people what to do from an office," she declared. "It's about understanding what they do in the lab. It's about removing barriers, not building them." Elijah's diversity initiatives were equally transformative. He instituted a blind review process for research proposals to reduce bias. He created mentorship programs specifically for underrepresented groups in medicine. He established clear metrics for diversity at all levels of the company, with executive compensation tied directly to achieving those goals. Most significantly, he changed the advancement pathways to ensure that innovative ideas were valued as highly as prestigious credentials. Lab technicians, administrative staff, and early career researchers suddenly saw realistic paths to leadership positions that had previously been closed to them. Within 6 months, the results were beginning to show. Research productivity improved from an average of 3.2 significant findings per quarter to 8.7. Patent applications increased by 142%. Employee turnover dropped by 47%. The stock price, which had plummeted to $31 on the day of the incident, was now trading at $64, a higher level than before the crisis. What Elijah Washington had done was not just save a company, he had reimagined what a medical research company could be. 1 year after the fateful afternoon at MedCore's reception, Horizon Health Sciences had undergone a complete metamorphosis. The company's visual identity had changed: a new logo, new research facilities, new open-concept office spaces. But the most significant transformation was invisible to the eye. It was the fundamental shift in how the company operated, how it treated its researchers, and how it valued innovation. The innovation standard had evolved from a training program into the cornerstone of the company's culture. Every new hire, from lab assistants to senior scientists, went through the same intensive 2-week orientation. They learned not just the technical aspects of their jobs, but the philosophy that would guide their work. Treat every idea as valuable because, directly or indirectly, it might be. The program included a powerful symbolic element. In the main research center in Boston, a glass case was installed in the entrance lobby. Inside was a simple university sweatshirt, similar to the one Elijah had been wearing that day. The plaque beneath it read, "Never judge an idea by its source. It might change the world." It was a daily reminder of the lesson that had cost the previous management $500 million. The practical changes were equally significant. The rigid hierarchy that had defined MedCore was reimagined. While expertise and experience still mattered, the barriers between roles became less pronounced. The reserved parking spots disappeared. The executive dining room was converted into a collaborative innovation space. The language changed from senior researchers to research catalysts. Small changes in terminology that reflected a massive shift in perspective. A new Ideas First initiative established clear protocols for evaluating research proposals. Any concept, regardless of its source, was to be evaluated on its scientific merit and potential impact on patient outcomes. Research assistants could propose projects alongside department heads. Administrative staff were encouraged to share insights from their unique vantage points. The burden of proof was placed on the idea, not the person presenting it. Most importantly, any proposal rejections were to be handled with respect and constructive feedback, never with dismissal or condescension. The former practice of credential filtering, whose primary function was to limit serious consideration to ideas from prestigious institutions, was eliminated entirely. In its place came innovation scouts, employees trained to identify promising concepts regardless of their source. Their performance metrics were based on discoveries facilitated, not proposals rejected. To demonstrate the dramatic shift in approach, Horizon created a powerful training video contrasting the before and after treatment of innovative ideas. The video showed a young researcher in casual clothing attempting to present a novel concept. First, under the old system where he was questioned aggressively and made to feel unwelcome. Then, under the new system where his idea was evaluated thoughtfully and treated with respect. The video ended with the reveal that the concept had led to a breakthrough in targeted drug delivery, underscoring that appearance and credentials never determine scientific value. Researchers were no longer evaluated based on their academic pedigrees, but on their contributions to medical knowledge and patient outcomes. They were given greater autonomy to pursue promising avenues of investigation. The arbitrary barriers that had been used to justify discrimination were replaced with transparent, consistent evaluation criteria applied equally to all. "We're not in the business of keeping people out," Elijah had declared in a company-wide memo. "We're in the business of bringing ideas in. Our job is not to judge who belongs. Our job is to ensure every potentially valuable insight belongs." The new corporate headquarters, relocated from a glass tower in downtown Atlanta to a renovated research campus in Cambridge, was designed to embody this philosophy. The executive offices had glass walls and were situated at the center of the building, surrounded by research laboratories. The message was clear. Leadership exists to serve discovery, not the other way around. Regular in-your-lab days required executives to work alongside frontline researchers, assisting with experiments, analyzing data, preparing samples. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a fundamental part of the new leadership approach. Understanding the challenges faced by research staff became a prerequisite for making decisions that affected them. The employee equity program had transformed the workforce. With 23% of the company now owned by its employees, the distinction between management and staff began to blur. Lab technicians documented procedures meticulously, not because it was policy, but because they were protecting their own investment. Researchers shared insights freely because collaboration improved outcomes, which improved their share value. Elijah had created a virtuous cycle. Employees who felt valued provided better science. Better science led to more medical breakthroughs. Breakthroughs led to improved patient outcomes. Improved outcomes improved financial performance. Improved financial performance increased the value of employee shares. And employees who saw their ownership stake grow felt even more valued. The receptionists who had once been trained to enforce exclusivity were now trained to create inclusivity. The metrics that mattered weren't how many people they kept out of executive areas, but how many visitors they made feel welcome throughout the facility. "The true measure of our success," Elijah told a gathering of employees on the one-year anniversary of the transformation, "is not the price of our stock. It's the pride you feel when you tell people where you work. It's the way patients benefit from our discoveries. It's the culture we're building together, one interaction at a time." 18 months after the incident that had transformed the medical research landscape, Elijah Washington was on a flight from Chicago to Boston. He was, as always, dressed in a hoodie and jeans, seated in economy class, his laptop open. He was not reviewing scientific papers. He was reading the raw, unfiltered employee feedback emails that were now piped directly to a special server he had access to. He was still the quiet force behind the transformation, but now he was a benevolent spirit obsessed with the health of his creation. The transformation of Horizon Health Sciences had been his most challenging and rewarding project. The company had not only survived, but was thriving. Its stock price now double what it had been before his intervention, its reputation for scientific excellence growing exponentially. The lead flight attendant, a woman named Jasmine Rodriguez, who had no idea who was in seat 22B, came down the aisle. She noticed Elijah's laptop and the intense focus on his face. "Burning the midnight oil, sir?" Jasmine asked with a friendly, genuine smile. "Something like that," Elijah replied. "Well, you look like a man who could use a coffee," Jasmine said. "On the house. We appreciate having you aboard." She returned a moment later with a hot coffee. It was a small gesture, a trivial act of kindness in the grand scheme of things. But for Elijah, it was everything. It was the data point he had been looking for. It was the proof that cultural transformation was possible everywhere, that the $500 million lesson had rippled beyond one company. He took a sip of the coffee, a quiet, satisfied smile on his face. The flight attendant had treated him with respect and warmth, Not because she recognized him as a famous researcher, but because that was how human beings should treat one another. The transformation was complete. Later in the flight, Elijah requested a blanket. Jasmine brought it promptly, again with that same genuine warmth. As she handed it over, her eyes briefly flickered with recognition. "Dr. Washington?" she asked quietly, uncertain. Elijah nodded with a small smile. Jasmine straightened momentarily, flustered. "Sir, I had no idea. You should have done exactly what you did." Elijah interrupted gently. "You treated me like a valued passenger. That's all I've ever wanted this world to do for anyone." Jasmine relaxed, understanding the deeper meaning of the exchange. That's the first thing they teach us now in customer service training. Everyone deserves respect, not because of who they might be, but because of who they are. "And how's that working out for you?" Elijah asked. Jasmine's face brightened with genuine pride. The executive offices had glass walls and were situated at the center of the building, surrounded by research laboratories. The message was clear. Leadership exists to serve discovery, not the other way around. Regular in-your-lab days required executives to work alongside frontline researchers, assisting with experiments, analyzing data, preparing samples. It wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a fundamental part of the new leadership approach. Understanding the challenges faced by research staff became a prerequisite for making decisions that affected them. The employee equity program had transformed the workforce. With 23% of the company now owned by its employees, the distinction between management and staff began to blur. Lab technicians documented procedures meticulously, not because it was policy, but because they were protecting their own investment. Researchers shared insights freely because collaboration improved outcomes, which improved their share value. Elijah had created a virtuous cycle. Employees who felt valued provided better science. Better science led to more medical breakthroughs. Breakthroughs led to improved patient outcomes. Improved outcomes improved financial performance. Improved financial performance increased the value of employee shares. And employees who saw their ownership stake grow felt even more valued. The receptionists who had once been trained to enforce exclusivity were now trained to create inclusivity. The metrics that mattered weren't how many people they kept out of executive areas, but how many visitors they made feel welcome throughout the facility. "The true measure of our success," Elijah told a gathering of employees on the one-year anniversary of the transformation, "is not the price of our stock. It's the pride you feel when you tell people where you work. It's the way patients benefit from our discoveries. It's the culture we're building together, one interaction at a time." 18 months after the incident that had transformed the medical research landscape, Elijah Washington was on a flight from Chicago to Boston. He was, as always, dressed in a hoodie and jeans, seated in economy class, his laptop open. He was not reviewing scientific papers. He was reading the raw, unfiltered employee feedback emails that were now piped directly to a special server he had access to. He was still the quiet force behind the transformation, but now he was a benevolent spirit obsessed with the health of his creation. The transformation of Horizon Health Sciences had been his most challenging and rewarding project. The company had not only survived, but was thriving. Its stock price now double what it had been before his intervention, its reputation for scientific excellence growing exponentially. The lead flight attendant, a woman named Jasmine Rodriguez, who had no idea who was in seat 22B, came down the aisle. She noticed Elijah's laptop and the intense focus on his face. "Burning the midnight oil, sir?" Jasmine asked with a friendly, genuine smile. "Something like that," Elijah replied. "Well, you look like a man who could use a coffee," Jasmine said. "On the house. We appreciate having you aboard." She returned a moment later with a hot coffee. It was a small gesture, a trivial act of kindness in the grand scheme of things. But for Elijah, it was everything. It was the data point he had been looking for. It was the proof that cultural transformation was possible everywhere, that the $500 million lesson had rippled beyond one company. He took a sip of the coffee, a quiet, satisfied smile on his face. The flight attendant had treated him with respect and warmth, not because she recognized him as a famous researcher, but because that was how human beings should treat one another. The transformation was complete. Later in the flight, Elijah requested a blanket. Jasmine brought it promptly, again with that same genuine warmth. As she handed it over, her eyes briefly flickered with recognition. "Dr. Washington?" she asked quietly, uncertain. Elijah nodded with a small smile. Jasmine straightened momentarily, flustered. "Sir, I had no idea. You should have done exactly what you did." Elijah interrupted gently. "You treated me like a valued passenger. That's all I've ever wanted this world to do for anyone." Jasmine relaxed, understanding the deeper meaning of the exchange. That's the first thing they teach us now in customer service training. Everyone deserves respect, not because of who they might be, but because of who they are. "And how's that working out for you?" Elijah asked. Jasmine's face brightened with genuine pride. "Honestly, it's transformed the job. I used to dread dealing with certain passengers. Now I look forward to the connections we make. When you're not constantly judging people or enforcing arbitrary rules, you can actually focus on making their experience better." Elijah nodded. "That's exactly the point. When we remove the barriers between people, we create the space for genuine human connection and real progress." Just then, a commotion erupted several rows ahead. A passenger was arguing loudly with another flight attendant about overhead bin space. Elijah watched carefully, curious to see how the situation would be handled. The flight attendant, a man named Carlos, listened calmly to the passenger's complaint. Instead of citing policy or escalating the confrontation, he offered a solution. "I understand your frustration, sir. Let me check if we can find some space in the front cabin for your bag. In the meantime, would you like a complimentary drink while we sort this out?" The passenger's anger visibly deflated. By the time Carlos returned with both a solution for his bag and the promised drink, he was apologizing for his outburst. Jasmine, who had been watching alongside Elijah, smiled. 2 years ago, that would have ended with threats to call security and a formal incident report. Now, it's just another problem solved. The difference, Elijah observed, is that we've stopped seeing people as problems to manage and started seeing them as human beings to serve. As Elijah watched this unfold, he noticed another passenger a few rows ahead. A young black woman in casual clothes, perhaps in her early 20s, being served with the same respect and attention as everyone else. The young woman was dressed almost identically to how Elijah had been that fateful day. Hoodie, jeans, sneakers. Yet her experience was completely different. "That young woman," Elijah said quietly to Jasmine, nodding toward the passenger. "Would she have had trouble being taken seriously in a professional setting under the old paradigm?" Jasmine followed his gaze and understood immediately. "Almost certainly. She would have been questioned, possibly redirected, definitely underestimated. The system was designed to exclude people who didn't fit a certain image. And now? Now we don't see clothes, we see people. We don't build barriers, we build bridges." Jasmine smiled. "That's the phrase our new CEO uses in every training session. Barriers or bridges? Which are you building today?" Elijah nodded, pleased to hear his metaphor had become part of the broader cultural vernacular. As the plane began its descent into Boston, the very city where his medical research journey had begun, Elijah felt a sense of completion. The transformation, born from a moment of profound disrespect, had achieved its ultimate goal. It had not just created a better medical research company. It had created a better way of advancing human knowledge. The story of Dr. Elijah Washington and Horizon Health Sciences quickly became a case study taught in medical schools and business programs across the country. Harvard Business Review published a comprehensive analysis titled "The Washington Reform: How a Moment of Discrimination Transformed an Industry." Stanford's Graduate School of Medicine created a course on scientific culture change using Horizon as its central example. The impact extended far beyond the company itself. Other healthcare institutions, watching Horizon's dramatic turnaround, began to re-examine their own cultures and practices. Mayo Clinic introduced a new training program focused on unconscious bias. Johns Hopkins revamped its research proposal evaluation system. The Cleveland Clinic expanded its diversity initiatives. Elijah was invited to speak at medical conferences, not as just another researcher but as a visionary. His message was consistent and clear. The most valuable asset in medical advancement is the culture. It's the only thing your competitors can't copy overnight. Wall Street, initially skeptical of such a focus on soft metrics like culture and employee satisfaction, couldn't argue with the results. Horizon's research productivity had outpaced the industry, with breakthrough discoveries 40% higher than its nearest competitor. The stock price had tripled since Elijah's intervention. Employee turnover had dropped to the lowest in the industry. The company's diversity initiatives were particularly transformative. Within 2 years, Horizon had the most diverse research team in the industry, with women and people of color holding 58% of senior positions. This wasn't just good optics, it translated directly to improved research outcomes and innovation. The company introduced industry-first treatments specifically designed for previously underserved patient populations, from personalized medicine approaches for diverse genetic backgrounds to culturally sensitive healthcare delivery systems. But perhaps the most significant legacy was not in the numbers but in the stories. Research partnerships that had once been impossible flourished under the new paradigm. A collaboration between Horizon and a small community college in rural Alabama led to a breakthrough in treatment delivery systems for underserved populations. A maintenance worker's observation about air circulation patterns in the labs sparked a revolutionary change in sterile research environments. These were not corporate directives. They were the natural expressions of a workforce that felt valued, empowered, and invested in the company's success. The most unexpected story came 18 months after the transformation. A local news station in Atlanta ran a piece about a former MedCore associate director who had found a new calling. Dr. Matthew Collins, after losing his job in the infamous incident, had spent 6 months unemployed and reflecting on his actions. He now worked for a nonprofit that helped disadvantaged students prepare for careers in medical research, focusing specifically on overcoming bias in scientific evaluation. "I learned the hard way that judging people by their appearance isn't just wrong, it's destructive to scientific progress," he told the reporter. "I'm trying to use that expensive lesson to help others avoid my mistakes." When asked if he resented Dr. Washington for what had happened, he shook his head. "He didn't ruin my career, my own prejudice did, he just held up a mirror." The reporter then revealed a surprising twist. Elijah Washington had become a major donor to the nonprofit, though he had never publicly connected his support to Dr. Collins' employment there. When asked about this connection, Elijah simply said, "People who've learned difficult lessons often make the most effective teachers." This quiet act of reconciliation, supporting Dr. Collins' redemption without seeking credit, spoke volumes about Elijah's true character. It wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about transformation, not just of companies, but of people. 3 years after the reception incident, Horizon Health Sciences launched a groundbreaking initiative called Open Medicine, a comprehensive program designed to make medical advancement more accessible to underserved communities. The program included subsidized research opportunities for first-generation medical students, dedicated mentorship for aspiring researchers from disadvantaged backgrounds, and partnerships with community organizations to provide healthcare innovations to those who had never benefited from cutting-edge medicine. At the launch event, Elijah revealed that the idea had come from an unexpected source. Thomas Harrison, the former CEO, whose consulting work had evolved into genuine advocacy for change within the industry. Elijah Washington himself maintained a low profile. He rarely gave interviews and deflected personal credit for the transformation. "I didn't change healthcare," he would say when pressed. "The people of Horizon changed healthcare. I just removed the obstacles that were preventing them from being their best selves." The real legacy, he believed, was not in creating a better medical research company, but in demonstrating a better model of scientific advancement, one where innovation and human dignity were not competing interests but complementary forces. In a rare interview with the New England Journal of Medicine on the 2nd anniversary of his intervention, Elijah reflected on the lessons of the Horizon story. "A company's culture is its most valuable and vulnerable asset," he said. "In our hyper-connected, transparent world, a single act of prejudice, once a private injustice, can now trigger a public and scientifically devastating reckoning. The ultimate form of karma is not just redirection, but radical systemic change." The story of Dr. Elijah Washington and Horizon Health Sciences is a stark and powerful illustration of a modern truth in our hyperconnected world. No act of discrimination happens in isolation. What was once private is now public. What was once ignored can now go viral. And the person you disrespect today might just be the one signing your research grants or your corporate death certificate tomorrow. It's a lesson in the true nature of power. Elijah didn't just get 2 employees fired. He didn't just force out a CEO. He took over an entire industry and rebuilt it on a foundation of respect, demonstrating that the most devastating response to discrimination isn't anger, it's transformation. This story resonates with so many of us because we've all experienced moments when we were judged by our appearance rather than our abilities. We've all been in situations where someone looked at our clothes, our skin color, or our gender and made assumptions about our worth. But Elijah Washington showed us that our response doesn't have to be defeat or rage. It can be strategic, deliberate, and ultimately transformative, not just for ourselves, but for entire systems. The next time you find yourself being judged by your appearance rather than your potential, remember Dr. Elijah Washington. Remember that sometimes the greatest power lies not in fighting the old system, but in building a new one where barriers become bridges, where judgment gives way to curiosity, and where everyone has the chance to contribute their unique gifts to our collective progress. As Elijah himself often says, true power isn't about keeping people out. It's about bringing the right ideas in. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.